gonna start the recording too. So here's the concept of this series, right? We want to talk about Jesus. And I'm like, oh yeah, Christians, they always talk about Jesus. But I actually wanted to talk about the person of Jesus. Like, who is this guy? This guy, you know? Beyond just kind of throwing the typical labels, titles that we give Jesus. Jesus is the Son of God. Jesus is this, you know, that is that. As if we completely already know what that means. Because sometimes it's more interesting to actually talk about that, you know? So here's the idea that I wrote up. Who do you say I am? Jesus' question still resonates in our ears today. His followers, you know, many of us here would consider ourselves his followers, right? Insist that the crucified Jesus lives now, right? With a resurrected body, directing God's reign over human history from heaven's throne room. But when others describe Jesus today, they draw a line between Christ of faith, right? That's how Christians would see him, and the Jesus of history, who is the itinerant Nazarene teacher, right? That pretty much everyone agrees lived and was there. As we examine his identity, we must be aware of the desire to arbitrarily remake Jesus in our own image. And this is something that all of us do, right? If you believe in Jesus, if you don't, if you're a Muslim that thinks Jesus was this guy, if you're whatever, we all want to portray Jesus a certain way, you know, a projection of our own desires. So we must draw near with humility and curiosity, ready to see this man with fresh eyes. Throughout this series, as we consider Jesus' first century world and our images of him in our 21st century world, we'll keep this question front and center. Okay? Who is Jesus? Who is this Jesus? So that's the idea of this series. And we just kicked it off with some conversation surrounding this whole topic last week because the speaker actually got sick last week. I wanted to introduce Matt and we're going to have some other Bible scholars. I'm going to have some like people, interesting people, including Marquise, come and share different perspectives on Jesus and other times. But I thought this would be an interesting angle, okay? Because Matt, I found him online, actually. I didn't know him before, like a lot of our other speakers. I found him online because I was like, why don't we find somebody? I just thought about Jesus films, you know? There's so many Bible movies made out there. How many of you guys have seen a Jesus movie before or Jesus film? I guess some of you guys, your video aren't on, but I assume pretty much all of us have seen something, right? And they're so different, right? They're all so different. I just found it interesting through stuff I've seen online about people. There's a couple of people out there that just love watching Jesus films, Bible films, and just picking them apart and saying, what do we learn from this? You know, like, because in every movie and every series, we talked about The Chosen the other day, tries to fill in the gaps of what we know from history and what we know from the Gospels and what we know about what Jesus, like who he was, right? And you know, what did his face look like? And so you actually, let me let someone else read this so I can shut up. Just to, okay, Emerald, you want it? I'll unmute you. Go ahead, read it.
From where? From more generally?
Yeah, sure. Title and then all the way down.
Oh, the whole thing?
Yeah.
Matthew Page has been running the Bible Films blog for nearly 15 years now. He has also written many film reviews for other publications. More generally, he enjoys leading film groups through conversations on Jesus in film. He has served as a consultant for the Channel 4 documentary, The Passion, Films Faith and Fury. Besides films about the Bible and Jesus, his favorite films are Cool Hand Luke, The Godfather, that's a good one. Magnolia, that's a nice one. Anything by Hitchcock, Straub, Huillet, I don't know what to say, Roberto Rossellini, or the Coen Bros, and anything starring Paul Newman. He lives in the UK, where he also enjoys exploring beautiful historic church buildings.
All right.
The UK.
I'm gonna stop sharing. The UK is England, right? And so I'm gonna hand it over to you, and then Matt, feel free. If I think you want me to play a video, feel free. If you want me to do that, I can let you do that.
Yeah, I wasn't sure whether we were. Firstly, hi everyone. Nice to meet you all.
Hello.
And enjoy hearing just the chat with been having so far. So yeah, thanks for having me along. Yeah, I think I've got some clips from the video. I don't know whether it's best. I've got a version here I can play if that's going to work. But I'm just aware stuff doesn't always work on over Zoom. So I can. Is it useful for me to put a YouTube link in the chat as well, or what's going to work best for people?
Yeah, whatever. I mean, I can share my screen. You can share. You know, you could
You
throw
can
it.
send the link to Jeremy and he'll share it.
You can throw it on
He'll
the
do
chat.
that.
Whatever is easiest for you.
Right. Okay. Well, maybe I'll drop the link in the chat, and then if it's not working for people, if sharing the screen's not working for people, then you can try it yourself on YouTube.
And by the way, I already warned Matt. I was like, hey man, we're all Americans, so we're probably gonna be like obsessed with your accent the whole time. So I apologize for us, you know.
That's
It is
okay.
really awesome. Thank you for apologizing for me, Jeremy.
So yeah, so I guess just picking up on what Jeremy's just been saying, one of the things that really, I guess, got me into looking at this subject was that thing of we all have our kind of our mental ideas of what we think Jesus was like, but often they come from ideas that are passed on to us that aren't necessarily right, or we bring our own ideas with us, and just as a kind of a way of looking at the kind of stories in the Bible, the stuff in the Bible from a different angle, and just kind of being able to kind of put some of that stuff open to question as to why do we look at things a certain way, and how what are the images of Jesus that are passed down to us, and how and why do we think those things, and how and what else, if we look at stuff through a different perspective, how might we learn from those and learn a bit more about the text and what the Bible says. So I think perhaps we should just go right ahead and look at the first couple of clips. Basically, what I've done with the first couple of clips is I've taken two films that deal with this passage word for word. So they're both looking at this passage in Matthew 21, and they both more or less use it as if the words in the Gospels are a script, right? So, but you'll notice immediately they're both very different, and they're quite probably very different from how you picture things as well. And so I just thought we'll play them both through, and then afterwards we can chat about what we thought of it, what we thought was better, why we thought how we think it might have been, why we think that, and see where it goes from there.
Right.
So do you want to play the first clip then, Jeremy?
Yeah, just let me know if you want me to stop it anywhere at any point. I'll mute myself, but yeah, and I'll just play.
Yeah.
All right.
Okay. So this is a 60s Italian film. Called L'Evangelo secondo Matteo.
Are we going to watch the whole thing?
No, we're just going to watch a little clip. So
Okay.
we're going to watch a kind of a couple of minutes clip of this, and then a couple of minutes from a kind of 1990s film, 1990s American film called The Visual Bible, which literally went through all of Matthew and used Matthew as a kind of film script. So yeah, do you want to press play on that?
Che ve ne pare? Un uomo aveva due figlioli e rivolto al primo disse: figlio mio, va oggi e lavora nella mia vigna. Ed egli rispose: vado, signore, ma non vi andò. Poi si rivolse al secondo e ordinò lo stesso. E quello rispose: no, non voglio andare. Ma poi pentito vi andò. Quale dei due fece la volontà del padre?
L'ultimo. In verità io vi dico che i pubblicani e le meretrici vi precedono nel regno di Dio, perché Giovanni venne a voi nella via della giustizia e voi non gli avete creduto. Ma i pubblicani e le meretrici gli hanno creduto. E voi, che avete veduto tutto questo, neppure vi siete pentiti, così da credere in lui.
Okay, so that's the first one. Let's have the second one as well.
What do you think? There was a man who had two sons. He went to the first and said, son, go and work today in the vineyard. I will not, he answered. But later he changed his mind and went. Then the father went to the other son and said the same thing. He answered, I will, sir. But he did not go. Which of the two did what his father wanted?
The first.
They answered. Jesus said to them,
I tell you the truth. The tax collectors and the prostitutes are entering the kingdom of God ahead of you. For John came to you to show you the way of righteousness, and you did not believe him. But the tax collectors and the prostitutes did. Even after you saw this, you did not repent and believe him.
Okay, so those are two versions, and basically all they've done is, well, not all they've done, they've taken the text and they've kind of put their own interpretation on it. And I think you can see, just from looking at those two, how much interpretation is there. That second film, part of the marketing for that second film was that there was no interpretation, that they weren't interpreting at all, it was just the words. But you can kind of see straight away, there's obviously a massive amount of interpretation in there. I thought just to kind of open up the discussion a little bit, perhaps we could write down, and we'll start by looking at the two next to each other. Perhaps you could just write down in the chat which one of the two you preferred, even if you hated them both, which was the least worst, or if you loved them both, which was your absolute favourite. And it'd be also interesting to know if either of you actually know, this is just for my own kind of geekiness, but if either of you watched either of those films before.
More Mediterranean.
Said Jesus was Mediterranean, more Mediterranean looking in the first one.
Yeah. He probably had a unibrow like the first one.
Well, if Jesus wasn't that good looking, I guess, which is maybe what some texts may say. What's it called? He had no arm or whatever. I think it was too American. I thought that the first one did a better job. Oh, sorry, we're supposed to take this out.
Well, no, I just thought it would just be a good way just to kind of put an original initial comment down, and then perhaps we want to turn the mics off and then we just chat about what people thought about them. Okay, so we've got, yeah, most people are going for the first one, which is interesting. Okay, so, sorry, I don't know everyone's names. I've just got iPad down, but I think I did catch your name earlier, but I can't remember what it was. So the second one was too American, but the delivery is more intense than the first one. Better acting. Yeah, and then anger pretty realistic. I think it's kind of interesting, but yeah, at the same time, I have to say what the emotions were at the moment. I think the second one particularly goes with this kind of smiley Jesus, and is really, so even in some of these passages where Jesus is obviously kicking ass, he's kind of he's still kind of does it and then gives a bit of kind of cheesy grin at the end, which is kind of odd. I guess, what do people think about them generally? You know, when you kind of think about that passage, I don't know how many of you are familiar with that passage, but do you think either of them is kind of realistic, or do you think they're both way off base?
I mean, for me, I think of this passage as his Jesus kind of pointing out the hypocrisy of the religious people, and then doing it in a kind of, I don't know what the word sneaky is, right? But like, they're the ones that said subversive way. They're the ones that said what was it? It was the first one is the one that should be commended. When he told the story, and then he puts it back at them and says, exactly, the tax collectors and prostitutes, the people that they're the first ones in the story. So like wow, that must have hit them really hard. But
that's what I was trying to, because I think I've heard this before. I just haven't like got into it, like dissected it. But I was trying to think, I'm like, why did he go from the story to a question to an answer to being angry? And I'm thinking maybe whoever he was talking to were maybe already like priests or apostles or something like that. And they answered correctly. The one who said no at first but still went and did it anyway should be rewarded in heaven. And is he saying, was Jesus' response kind of like, right, the tax collectors, even though they chose sin, they repented, but you who chose righteousness still have not yet to repent? Is that what he's trying to, like they're the ones who said yes at first but still didn't do it, right? That's what he was like. So yeah, that makes sense now if I'm
Yeah, that's my understanding, is he's kind of letting them, he's using language to spring the trap on themselves.
right. Like yeah, you answered the question correctly, henceforth you should know better.
Something like that.
Yeah.
Right. But I guess in terms of talking about comparing the two clips, I would say I like the reason why I like the first one better. Well, it's hard to say, but the first one shows some anger. He's like, ugh,
Yeah, it shows the disappointment. I think if I was to just watch the second one, I would still be very confused. Like, what the heck does that mean, Jesus? I don't get it. But the second one, the first one definitely reeled it in that he was telling us, he was giving an example. He was given an answer by someone he's trying to get a point across to. And then his response was just, okay, so I like, that's what I'm trying to say. Like, you know the answer, you know what's right. Why are you still being like a disappointment? Not that Jesus is like, not that God is like disappointed, but he probably is, a lot of the time. But yeah, like just giving like that, not anger, but disappointment. Like, now I'm telling you, they're gonna get into heaven before you do because they've already repented. Even though they've chose sin in the first place, you still have yet to show that, yes, I will, sir, go do that thing.
Yeah.
So yes, the first one is my favorite because it gives that contrast to I'm telling a story and bam, you got the point, you got the lesson. You should have been God.
Yeah, can I say something? I know in that
No,
past.
no, I'm not done yet. No, I'm joking. Go ahead.
I know in that passage the Pharisees asked him, I think they asked him like pretty much, who gave you the power to like, do these things, whatever. And Jesus was like, I'm gonna ask you a question. The baptism of John, like, was it from man or was it from heaven? And they gathered around, whatever, they said blah blah blah. And it was like, we can't tell. We can't tell who it's from, and then that's what Jesus said, then you can't tell whether if I do these things from God or from man. Then he told the parable about the two sons. And I guess the ones that I watched, I know it's a lot of versions, but the one that I watched, and I like what Emerald said, that Jesus was disappointed, I guess the one that I was watching, like it was more so Jesus wasn't like disappointed, like, oh, you should know better, but more so like he was like broken. His heart was like he was brokenhearted. He was like, in pain. His pain, it was disappointment as in like sorrow, disappointment, not, oh, you guys better get it straight, whatever. But it was more so like, like a sorrow, like, wow, like, come on, man, like get it together,
Yeah, like better.
Yeah, right. But
I see
yeah.
That would be good too. I think the second one was just a bad representation because I think for the disappointment, like you said, you can go the anger, the more hostile way, or the sorrow way, like the more not like sympathetic way, like well then yeah, I get it. I think I just think that second example was just like not the greatest.
Can I throw a wrench in there? Because I feel like a lot of people look, when they think about Jesus, like the picture out there is like this nice and kind of the second Jesus seemed to be a very familiar one. I don't know what I'm talking about.
Yeah, definitely.
Like a just like a happy-go-lucky, cheerful, like
yeah,
kind of guy. I don't know. I'm basing it off like a 20-second clip, but
He seemed like a cool dude.
Yeah, it was pretty odd because it's just, of course it's a film, so it's gonna be scripted. Like you're gonna tell like they're just reading lines. It's not really no emotional. It's not really raw. It's not raw. It's not raw. You know what I'm saying? People don't really show emotion. There's no movement. It's just, everybody's just still repeating lines. So of course it's going to seem a little bland. It's going to seem a little odd. It's going to seem expected because I think the main part was just illustrating the picture, but also getting the words out, but not necessarily illustrating in a way where it's going to be felt emotionally, you know, or.
I think maybe we just, like you said, we just need more of the clip, more context. Maybe if we would have watched a few minutes before that, and that it would have felt more not still. Is that what you said? Still, like bland?
Yeah, it was expected. You know, one of them Jesus film, you expect, oh, here. It's another Jesus film, you know, just bland, you know, so it's kind of like that. But the first one made me laugh because the way they portrayed Jesus was just like everybody got the same, kind of like the same image of Jesus, like, you know, the same look, you know, the same features of Jesus, you know. So it's kind of funny.
One.
Yeah, that's what made me laugh. It was just funny. So.
Yeah, because I love the hat in the second one, and the first one.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think the kind of part of the target with the hats is to kind of like draw the parallels between the Pharisees in the story and kind of a lot of certain, well, particularly in Italy, you've got kind of quite a big hat wearing church going on there. That, you know, that with a lot of the kind of bishops and so on in the Catholic Church, they have a lot of, you know, quite often have quite big headwear. And so I think partly that was the kind of target to try and bring up some of that stuff, I think. But yeah. Okay, has anyone got anything else to say about that? Should we move on to the next bit? Okay. So yeah, what I'm going to do with what we're going to do now is just before we play the clip. So I decided to do this to look at this clip before the stuff in Atlanta this week that we've kind of been talking about before. But it does strike me that we've got points of similarity right at the heart of this clip in terms of what we've seen this week. I don't know. I mean, I quite like it. It'd be good actually. Could someone? It'd be good if someone perhaps to read this passage before we look at the clips. I don't know if anyone's got a Bible to hand, but
I'm going to pull the passage up. Is it what verse is in John 8?
It's John 8, 2 to 11.
Okay. All right. Nobody's got it memorized? I think John 8 might be. No, John 6 is the bread of the world. John.
Yeah.
11.
John 8.
Okay. Verse 2.
Yeah.
At dawn, he appeared again in the temple courts where all the people gathered around him, and he sat down to teach them. The teachers of the law and the Pharisees brought in a woman caught in adultery. They made her stand before the group and said to Jesus, "Teacher, this woman was caught in the act of adultery. In the law, Moses commanded us to stone such women. Now what do you say?" They were using this question as a trap in order to have a basis for accusing him. But Jesus bent down and started to write on the ground with his finger. When they kept on questioning him, he straightened up and said to them, "If any of you is without sin, let him be the first to throw a stone at her." Again, he stooped down and wrote on the ground. At this, those who had heard began to go away one at a time, the older ones first, until only Jesus was left, with the woman still standing there. Jesus straightened up and asked her, "Woman, where are they? Has no one condemned you?" "No one, sir," she said. "Then neither do I condemn you," Jesus declared. "Go now and leave your life of sin."
Okay, so I mean, just as a kind of on a very kind of surface level, you've obviously got these men that have kind of judged this woman and are prepared to kill her for her kind of her sexual activity. And you know, I guess obviously, as I say, I kind of chose this passage before what happened at the weekend happened, but it's kind of quite a kind of stark reminder of some of this stuff, I guess. And I think just to say a couple of things about the passage, it's kind of quite an interesting passage. It's one of those passages that most Jesus films cover at some point, not always the ones that are just in Passion Week, but most of the other ones. It's quite a popular one. And it is also kind of historically is a kind of interesting passage because it kind of, in some of the early texts, it's in Luke and some of it's in John. So that's quite a kind of unusual feature of it. And we've got a kind of, you know, there's a kind of very big male narrative in this thing. So we don't actually, so it isn't the case that Jesus finds this woman in adultery. We get the story of these men have brought this woman to him. And you get that kind of that. So we kind of, so the story is being fed through from them. There's no man here. This woman seems to have been committing this act on her own, apparently, which is not really possible. And the whole kind of narrative is everything is kind of prejudged by them. We get their account, and then so we've got a group of men bring this woman before another man in a story that has been written down for us by men, and has largely been interpreted by men through church history as well. So, but it's also a kind of a great example of Jesus's kind of both his wisdom and his compassion, and some of those things as well. So we're going to look at 9 clips of these, and I think it would just be I'm just trying to think the best way to do it. How long have we got, Jeremy? You're on mute, sorry.
I mean, I don't know if anybody's in a rush, but I think we've got time.
Okay. Well, perhaps we'll play a couple and then we'll have a chat about them, and then we'll play another couple, and we'll do it that way maybe. Yeah. So this first one is a silent film. It's from 1927. It's by the same. I don't know if you know the kind of the Ten Commandments film, but it's by the same director as that. And this is the longest clip of all of these. But so yeah. So do you want to play? We'll go with this one.
Why do you treat this woman so? What has she done to deserve this?
She was caught in the act of adultery.
Is this true? You have judged her rightly. She is guilty of adultery.
The law calls for her to be stoned.
Yes. Let him among you who is without sin cast the first stone. Who are you?
Mary of Magdala.
No man speaks against you now, Mary. Neither do I. Go your way and sin no more.
Just want to pause it there, Jeremy. So yeah, so I think if we just kind of have a bit of a chat about those two clips now, I think just good things to bear in mind are, you know, what were the things you thought the film did well, what did it not do very well, and you know, what did it make you think about, realize about the passage maybe, or think about it in a different way, or what stood out to you. So who wants to kick things off?
What stood out to me in the silent film was that they showed what he wrote in the sand. And I guess it was kind of like the guys were coming up to question him, and then they're like, oh crap, he knows my secret. Ran away. I like that because they say that nobody knows what he wrote in the sand, and instead of leaving it like that, they was like, let's do a little something with that, right? I appreciated that for the film. The second film, I like how he played into the, oh yeah, you're right, she did it. What are we gonna do now? And then like, oh yeah, that, okay, let the first person, you know, I like that just I like that. I don't know.
Cool, thank you. What about anybody else?
I know Marquis got something to say. He was laughing.
I actually, I mean, I like the first one. To me was kind of like, I like how it was like everybody was like up and about, like moving around, and you know, I believe it was really, it was, I don't know if it was really like that, because
I like the background acting.
If you're waiting for someone to answer, like you're going to be still, you know, you're going to be waiting intensively, you know, see what they're going to say. But the moving around was kind of like, it kind of drew a picture of well, not comical, but how, you know, how it could possibly be, you know, how like people moving around, nobody's like the guy, they had the guy waiting around like, I think this, you know, that was like, stuff like that possibly could have happened just out of like,
that's
just,
very
just being human, you know, people
that's
do
very
that
silent film
human, right? But the also what Emerald said, you know, what Emerald said about him writing the sand, like I kind of do not agree with that. Like I don't necessarily like when people who like make the Bible, they start to add stuff that's not really there, or they start to add stuff that, you know, they add their own interpretation, you know, rather than, you know, trying to build a better interpretation or a correct interpretation of what actually happened. Like I think it was the first.
Well, it's a film, like.
Yeah. Let me finish first. Let me finish. It is a film. However, they don't give people. It shouldn't give them the confidence to actually implement their own version of how they think. What happened? Like he wrote thief, murderer. Like Emerald said, nobody knows what he wrote. You know, so I would have just left it at that. Like. He's writing the sand, you know, and they kept it out, you know, just kept it out of the scene, just him writing in the sand. That's it.
That's what, but see, that's why I said I
yeah.
appreciate
Wait. Let me finish. Let me finish, please. Let me finish real quick because I just want to say this one part. But the second one, the funny part was the second one when he had the stone and he was like, you know, ushering out to people, and it kind of reminded me of that the movie Troy. When he was like, is there no one else? Is there no one else? So that kind of remind me. That's all I gotta say. That's all I want to say. But yeah, that's all I gotta say.
Yeah, I really love the background comedy in the first one a lot too.
I don't know if the director thought it was comedy in 1927.
I think it was. I think it definitely was, because that was the silent film go-to, is having that the like something now, like background acting is so important, but in a lot of movies now you just see people walking by real fast, whatever. But like to really, especially in silent films, because nobody's talking, all the expressions and the eyebrows and the thoughtfulness of what their body actions and movements are, that was awesome. That was really good. And I appreciate it, even though like we pointed out, the writing in the sand was not mentioned, and like nobody knows what he wrote. I like that they added that, because it is a very important part. If you were there thousands of years ago, like that's what actually happened. He wrote something in the sand, and instead of ignoring it and nobody knows anymore, like, yeah, they added their own little thing, but it's not that it wasn't dangerous what they did, right? Like nobody, like, I don't think less of Jesus for it. But, you know, for people who don't know that nobody knows, or that that's not right, it could be a little misleading. But like I said, it's not dangerous. Like nobody's going to see that and then think completely different of how or who he was. I mean, but inside that silent film, that was definitely comedy. That's definitely comedy.
Yeah. Before you begin, Jeremy, I want the first one was more intense than the other one, which is more intense. They had, like Emma was saying, had a lot of facial expression. They had a lot of personal scenes where the people walked up to Jesus. He's writing the sand, and you could see their reaction to what was going around. Like it was real. It was just real dramatic. Of course, for that time, I guess. So it was really dramatic. I'm sorry, Jeremy. Go ahead.
Especially without audio.
I'll say the second one added also the Mary Magdalene thing, which is a common trope of viewing Mary Magdalene as having been sexual. It's not necessarily. It's an interpolation that a lot of Christians have added that isn't necessarily. It's an educated guess that people have, right?
That she was married.
Educated.
Yeah, and not necessarily educated, right?
Yeah.
It's become a cultural sort of thing that people have added on to. But I will say there's
wait, what are you talking about?
Just this view,
that the woman was Mary Magdalene.
Yeah.
But it's not
exactly say that it was
it's not that's not in the Bible at all. That was kind of later church tradition kind of made that up.
And then another thing I was saying is, I think that between Marquise and Emerald is the perennial debate. That's, I think, a reasonable one about what's, maybe I'll take a mediating position about what's reasonable imaginative freedom surrounding a reasonable sort of where can your imagination go within limits, you know, that still faithfully articulates an extension of the text, because in my mind, we always imagine. You can't escape from the fact that you imagine. Once you hear a word, you're imagining what that looks like. So the question is your imagination just running wild, or is it a plausible articulation? So, and that's always been, I think, any kind of the spectrum from what Marquise is saying towards something like what Emerald's saying, and sometimes when people go even further where Emerald's saying, I think has always been a debate, because once you release something beyond the text, you know, once you put, is it okay to visualize Jesus as an actor? Uh-oh, that wasn't what Jesus actually looked like. You're making a false image, right? And I know that that's always been a sort of a, so it does put more on the person viewing to differentiate between, this is a depiction, this isn't necessarily the actual facial expressions on Jesus' face, but we want to do our best to, I don't know, is that fair? I think
Yeah.
that's kind of like an ongoing, I don't
You
know.
know what? Yeah.
It also makes me think, oh my gosh, here we go. Stop. I'm joking.
No, I was saying, once you make a movie about something that doesn't really have a visual, like an actual picture, then of course you're going to be adding your own, you know, adaptation or imagination into it. You know, you're going to do that regardless. You know, so no matter what you do, no matter what you create, you're adding your own version. Unless it's something that's written down verbatim. Jesus had this kind of hair, this color hair, this length, this bone structure, this and that. Then it's a different story. But once you start to fill in the blanks, you know, of course it becomes your own interpretation. You know. But like you were saying, you know, well, I think Emma was saying, like, it's not necessarily dangerous if you're trying to portray, a close adaptation without going too far. Like Jesus had long flowing hair and it was blowing in the wind and it was blind. Like that's far from the truth. You know what I'm saying? That's far from it. You know, so you know, trying to build a close adaptation rather than one you just want to be creative and say, you know, Jesus had a samurai sword all the time. Like, come on, like really, you know what I'm saying? So there's safe boundaries and there's, you know, misleading boundaries, you know. So I just want to do that.
I think it's interesting too, thinking about it now, like everybody was on Jesus's top back in the day, right? And nobody knows what was written in the sand. So I'm thinking like, maybe they're not too far out. It's like, maybe they're not too far off. And like the guy, hey, what did Jesus write? Nothing. I don't know. It's just scribbles. It's just plain black. It didn't make no sense to me. You don't, don't go read that. I'm gonna kick sand over it in a few seconds. It's like, no. But like it kind of makes sense, you know, like it could have been. But like I think it's just important for whoever is gonna be watching these movies to be
discerning,
knowing to some extent of it, and hopefully also guided in their journey getting to know Christ. So yeah, like I said, it's not dangerous. It's not dangerous.
Yeah, I know one more thing. I think it's not dangerous per se, but if that's your only way of knowing, you know, what happened in the Bible, knowing Jesus, then it becomes dangerous. Like if you stick to the movies more than what you stick to what's actually written, then it becomes dangerous. Because I met a few people who talked about, you know, what actually happened. I'm like, that wasn't in the Bible. Like, what do you mean? Like, you know, oh yeah, he did this and this and that, and Peter said this. I was like, no, he didn't. Like, you know, because it's not written in the Bible, you know. So that's their own version. So people got to be careful. You know, you got to test everything to see if it lines up, you know, accordingly. You know, if it doesn't line up, it's probably false. You know, most likely it's probably false. You know.
And Marquise is really sensitive to text because he does this thing called role play fighting, where every little thing you're writing out, like literally how much, you know, what the person's weapon is like, and what you're writing it enough to be plausible. You're writing the fight out, and then you actually have sort of these rules for how you write these things, and you write it back and forth, and so I think Marquise is very sensitive to the nature of writing and imagination and how they fit together. But anyways, I'm just throwing that out for context. I think that would be helpful. Yeah.
I mean, yeah, I mean, I find that really interesting because, just in terms of in terms of how we come to the text, even our own kind of personalities or interests or vocations or whatever shape how we look at these things, and just like your different the kind of baggage that all of us bring, we all bring our own baggage when we come and look at the text. And that's true of the directors, that's true of us as readers, it's true of preachers. I mean, we've kind of talked about people that we talked about the kind of filmmakers and the liberties that they can kind of bring. We've seen a couple of them, which and a lot of preachers do the same thing, and historians do the same thing as well. And it's kind of interesting, and how easy it is to kind of just. One of the things that really stood out to me about the second clip this time around, I've obviously seen these a lot, but I thought it was really interesting that in the second one he says she has sinned, she has done this. Well, that's not in the text. Jesus never actually says that in the text, and that's kind of an interesting thing. And I think, and one of the reasons I find watching the films interesting is because they kind of draw attention to these things. Sometimes they show you something that you've like read the passage 10 times before and you've never even noticed, because you've kind of had so much, someone else's take or your own take on it, and it just kind of like makes you look at it in a new way. But yeah, okay. I'm aware there's a couple of you we've not heard much from. Does anyone else want to say anything of it?
I guess the thing I noticed in the first one, Jesus was glowing. And,
yeah, a little bit.
The second one, you noticed that the woman.
Yeah, he was backlit.
The woman was the only one wearing colors.
Yeah, everyone else.
Oh, yeah.
Right. And it's like they wanted to highlight, almost to make it like she's
out
what,
of
she's it obviously draws
promiscuous. She's wearing red.
Woman thing, isn't it?
But I guess
that was another thing. Oh, sorry.
Well, I was gonna say in terms of like art, we have control of how we interpret and present it. We have no control of how people receive it or understand it. So even if I'm very careful with text or with words, it doesn't guarantee that someone is going to grasp exactly like what my heart is saying or what I. So yeah, I mean the Jesus writing specific words in the ground, it portrays like how many people will feel when they get close to Jesus, like, oh wow, like I'm in a really vulnerable state and he knows. And even if it's not written in the words or the text, that's the nature of, not to shame people, but to bring things to light and feel the conviction to
shine a light where it's needed.
Mm-hmm. The word.
But the soundtrack, when there's no words, soundtrack is really intense.
Yeah, the chick's eyes in the first one were really, really exaggerated. I loved her expression. I remember talking about I remember talking about how just back in the day things were so different that when we read certain stories in the Bible, we don't really think of just how bad or crazy things could have been. Like I think we talked about this story in particular, and it came up that she probably could have been she probably could have been being raped or something, and like no questions asked, this woman is just having sex out of wedlock or cheating on her husband or whatever, before marriage or whatever, and like we'd never really know because they didn't do like trials. It's just they caught her, they drag her out naked or whatever, uncovered, and they're wanting to stone her, but Jesus so happened to be there. They're like, take her to Jesus. Like, and just how it's just, I don't know, different things like that. Like I think of how if being stoned as a result of cheating or having sex before marriage back in the day, just how probable it is that it was willingly, you know, and just that those women came out and they're like, the second one was strong. She was like, how dare you touch me, right? The first one was like exaggerated eyes, but not necessarily looking scared. I think I would have liked them to look more scared or something. But yeah, that's it.
I like the shame element of it. In an honor shame culture, perhaps sort of not like in our Western individual culture where it's like, where you're like, maybe like what you're saying, Emerald, maybe they're like, oh, I just feel ashamed and like, I'm already dead to the community. You know, you're not protesting it kind of thing. That's what you're saying, right? Maybe.
Yeah.
Maybe.
Something that struck me this time around with the first one, sorry, I'm going to move on in a minute, was like this time around was how the kind of the joking about which stone was the more pointed one, or you know, whatever he was doing, kind of weighing them up. That almost kind of offsets the danger of the situation. It's you know, it then
it's like it's just another day.
Yeah, it doesn't feel like a mob that is on the verge of murdering a woman. You know, it feels, you know, it's kind of it shifts, it takes away some of the rawness of that situation, which yeah, just that struck me this time around. Is there anyone else that wants to add something, or should we move on?
I do want to say about that part, like about the people choosing stones. You know, I'm not sure if you said it kind of changed the tone and the severity of like actually stoning a woman. I guess for me, I guess the culture that I was brought up in or whatever, you know, people, it's not the fact, it's like a mockery. Like it's more of a mockery rather than it's like, oh, we're just joking around. We're not really going, you know, I'm not saying that you're saying, but it's more of so a mockery or the twisted mind of people. Rather than I want to hit it with the biggest stone. Should be this stone, this stone, this stone. And I want to pick this. I want to hit it with the biggest stone possible. You know, so these thoughts actually, you know, go through people's mind when they just want to do like the most twisted things. You know, like and it not the fact that it's just twisted, but they want to enjoy it in the most possible way. You know, we even see this in some of the movies with serial killers or whatever. Should I choose this knife or this knife? This knife is serrated, but this knife is, you know, just like a razor. And I'm going to use this one because I want to enjoy it in this type of fashion. You know, so for me, that kind of brought out the wickedness of people. You know, just them trying to enjoy this moment, them trying to just indulge in this moment and in the best way possible. So that kind of struck me as wow, like people are really wicked. You know, so I
think that's what he was trying to get at. Like in film, that when we're talking film, that notion of, like I said, you know, you guys said it probably isn't comical, but I say it is, just because they're trying to lighten up that mood of, like you said, we're about to murder a woman for something so normal, not normal, but like murdering her would be normal, and so they're just trying to lighten up that scene in that kind of way, like this evil stuff that these people do is normal to them. And so just having that, like you said, that guy, he's going to pick up a serrated knife or a smooth knife, and he's going to put thought into it. This one will rip the bone easier, this one will not. It's just it's normal to him, he's thinking about it. Same thing as the people there. So but in a comical sense, like with the facial expressions and stuff like that, I think the direction of that scene was to lighten it up, to make it seem like, wow, this evil thing is normal and funny to these people. I think that's what the film was going for.
Okay, great. Well, it's really interesting discussion so far, everyone. The next clip is something a bit different. So this is from it's an Indian film, from the kind of 1970s. So we'll watch this one, and then we'll watch we'll watch two more, and then we'll come talk about the same stuff again. So,
కూడా ఈమె వ్యభిచరిస్తుండగా పట్టుబడింది. ఇటువంటి పతితల్ని రాళ్లతో కొట్టి చంపమని మన మోషే ధర్మశాస్త్రం ఘోషిస్తున్నది. మరి ఈమె పట్ల మీ తీర్పు ఏమిటి?
అందరికీ తీర్పు చెప్పగల నా తండ్రి ఉండగా నేను తీర్పు చెప్పను.
అయితే మోషే ధర్మశాస్త్ర ప్రకారమే ఈ పతితని రాళ్లతో కొట్టి చంపమంటారా? రాళ్లతో కొట్టి చంపండి.
ఆగండి. మీలో పాపం చేయని వాడెవడో ఈ పాప మీద మొదటి రాయి వెయ్యండి. మీ కంట్లో దూల ఉంచుకొని ఎదుటి వారి కంట్లో నలుసు వెతకటానికి ప్రయత్నించకండి.
అమ్మ బాబోయ్, నా పాపాలను నేల మీద రాసేస్తున్నాడు.
బిడ్డ, వాళ్ళెవరూ నిన్ను శిక్షించలేదా?
లేదు తండ్రి.
నేను నిన్ను శిక్షించను. ఇక నుండి ఏ పాపమూ చేయకుండా బ్రతుకు.
ప్రభు, నన్ను క్షమించు. ఇక నుండి నేను ఏ పాపం చేయను. మీ పాదాలపై ప్రమాణం చేస్తున్నాను.
నీ పశ్చాత్తాపమే నిన్ను పునీతురాలను చేసింది.
Okay, so this is from the Martin Scorsese film. Rest in Touch and Portrayals.
Get out of there! Get out of there! Get out of the way! This is not your business. Do you want to get hurt?
Did you hear what he said, idiot? Move!
No, I don't want this.
Listen to him. He doesn't want this.
But we want it. Why?
We don't have to tell you why!
Not enough we live in a whorehouse. But she's a Jew. She works on the Sabbath. She goes with Romans on the Sabbath. She broke Moses' law. She dies.
Who has never sinned? Who?
Which one of you people has never sinned?
Whoever that is, come up here and throw these.
That is Jesus of New York.
Hide.
Good. Take this. It's bigger.
Be careful, Zebedee. There is a God. He's seen you cheat your workers. He's seen you with that widow. What's her name?
Judith.
Judith. Aren't you afraid God will paralyze you if you lift that stone? That your arm will wither? That you lose all strength?
Okay. So
That lady looked more vulnerable, that last one.
Yeah.
That was raw. Definitely New Yorker.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was like, wow, that is an American accent if I ever heard one.
The Indian version was interesting to think about, like almost kind of.
It was interesting.
Actually, Jesus as a Swami, you know, in some ways, like as a Hindu, like as an Indian mystic kind of teacher, almost the meditative style. It's fascinating. I was wondering about that woman in the back. You know, perhaps she herself, in watching kind of how she was affected by this. You don't know who she was, but yeah.
Yeah, so she is Mary Magdalene in this film. So in contrast to with a lot of the Western Jesus films that show Mary Magdalene as a woman being accused, here she's quite definitely not. So Mary isn't kind of portrayed as a prostitute; she's portrayed as kind of relatively wealthy. Which, one of the things the Bible does tell us about Mary Magdalene is that she was one of the people that supported Jesus in his ministry, so she presumably had some wealth.
Yes, I found these two interesting in how, I guess, the people reacted to Jesus in the first one, and then I found it interesting in the most recent one that we watched of how Jesus interacted with the Pharisees and the people surrounding the woman. It felt very kind of like in the silent film, although there was no dialogue, and though the interpretation may have been not accurate with like the writing in the sand, I felt like that was like an artistic way of God, like in compassion, showing like a mirror to the people. But then I felt like the most recent one, like he was almost like guilting them, or like putting like a threat-ish kind of feel of like, aren't you scared what God's gonna do to you, or like this and that. So I thought that was very interesting. I never really kind of heard or thought of Jesus in that tone and in that way.
Same.
Yeah, and then the first one, it just, I guess I was kind of like taken aback. Understanding that it's a film, but also taken aback of how quickly the people dropped their rock and immediately ran. It kind of lost its sense of like that self-reflection time of like, oh, like I can't throw this because I have also sinned. So that kind of, in that way, kind of felt like very theater-like, where it just kind of quickly goes and moves the story forward. But yeah, I don't know.
I noticed the same thing, and I was expecting it. Like I was waiting for it because I'm like, all right, we're comparing a couple different movies. Why are these people dropping their stones so fast? If I was some ignorant person back then, Jesus is like, oh, if you have never sinned, throw the stone, and I would have thrown it. I would have underhanded it right in the face. No, I'm joking. But like, I wouldn't have thought about it, right? Oh, I'm not on trial. She is on trial. And so when they're not throwing the stone, when they are putting the stones down, their thoughts probably are, oh no, what's gonna happen to me if I am such a hypocrite to continue to throw this stone? And then I was like, all right, one of these, he has to say it. He's gonna say it. And I was expecting it, but I didn't expect him to do it like that. It was very, like I said, New Yorker. But I was wondering when they were gonna, like, maybe what he drew in the sand was a verse that was kind of like threatening, like not threatening, but like, there are consequences to what you do, and we know that, and I thought it was very interesting too. I thought it was very interesting. It was cool.
Yeah, if I may share my view. Now that I'm watching all these different films, and with the Indian one and the Hindu one, it seems like a lot of it is based off of just like the culture or how or whatever time it was made in, what type of films that was out, people kind of based it around that. And also, people don't want to make the same film. Like someone made a Jesus film, they're going to make it a little more different or add a little more different elements to make it better, because it's a film industry, you're going to make it better than the other one, you're going to add certain elements to make it better, but as both what Grace and Emma was talking about with the stones, I know in the passage, I'm not sure if we read in the passage, I probably wasn't listening, but I know in the passage talks about how they dropped the stones from the oldest to the youngest. The oldest dropped their stones first, and the youngest dropped their stones first. Now we've seen a lot of them, like the one we just watched with the Hindu people. They all dropped their stones and ran. That's far from what happened in the scripture. They dropped the stones, but the context of how they dropped their stones wasn't perfect. And it would have been, for me, it would have been more better if they actually showed the oldest people just like, you know what, he right, drop my stones. And the youngest people, still hold their stones, but actually still holding anger or still holding contemplate and trying to think, I gotta find a way. I gotta you know what? I just give up, because the wisest one dropped the stone. You're right, I send the youngest one, still trying to figure out a way to throw the stone, but they can't succeed. So it would have been.
And you know
been
what?
good.
That is a great representation. I'm sorry, of the older people being an example. Yeah, that is like I didn't that's what it said in the Bible.
Right. So I was hoping that for that type of image. As far as the films, the second one was crazy because as soon as Jesus picked up the stones, the guy was like, "Oh, he gonna throw them at me." But it's like if they knew who Jesus was, like why would they think that he was going to throw them at them? So it's just a bad depiction of Jesus. It's like it's inconsistent with what Jesus been doing this whole time. All of a sudden you scared, like he gonna throw stones at me because he picked them up. Like, come on, it was just weird. It was a weird inconsistency that they didn't have the input. As far as like the threatening stuff, I understand you wanna portray Jesus in this powerful, I don't want to say tyrant type person, but for you to portray that a person was actually scared of Jesus when he picked up stones was just totally off the mark, which is weird. It's weird completely, So that's my take on it.
Think of it as a threat, more of as like a warning. But he did come across very like angry.
I don't know whether it was clear from the clip because it was right at the start, but he does actually get hit by one of the rocks or a couple of the rocks when he first kind of goes in, and so that kind of, I mean, as a film, Last Temptation of Christ is a very strong interpretation.
Well, isn't it trying to push little boundaries, that one?
Yeah, it's trying to kind of be edgy and do its own thing. So it's not so concerned with kind of producing a realistic portrait, and I think but yeah, that's one of the things it is trying to kind of get across, that kind of Jesus' more human side. It was very much the focus there, and he's that kind of level of anger beyond what is in the is in the Bible, but.
And then also he knew that guy, like he called him by name and he spoke on some things. So in that movie, I haven't watched it. Maybe they have like a pre-existing relationship before that lady came into the picture. And so instead of a threat, it was more like a warning. Like, dude, really, you really finna throw that rock? Let me remind you real quick, because I love you and I wanna warn you before you make this bad decision, because I'm standing right here in front of you. Put that crap down right now, right? I take more as that, and like I said, I find it interesting because that's basically what everyone's thinking. He's just saying it, and that's why they put the stones down. But I would have liked to see that older to youngest visual, because that sets also a good representation of how the elders are leading the pack, like whether they know it or not. You are the example being set for the next generations, and if somebody has to put down the stone.
Well, that's an interpretation too, Emerald, because it could be that the older people have sinned so much more, and they're like, yeah, I can't, I've committed adultery too in the past, or whatever, right? It could be just that they feel more guilty. I've done my stuff. I've been through my stuff,
Right. They're probably thinking I've done a lot of sins since I've been around.
I wonder, Matt, I don't know. Am I allowed to throw a question back towards you?
Yeah, feel free.
Since you've seen so many of these, and I guess we can watch a couple more, but since you've seen so many of these, I wonder, do you see, how different people, because they're thinking about Jesus is this Jesus, holy figure. Jesus is the Son of God. Jesus is the Son of Man. He's the one, he's God incarnate, right? And different people probably produce Jesus films who have different opinions, right? Some of them are producing it as a part of trying to help people follow Jesus that do believe in that. And some people that don't, right? And some people that are, like you're saying, this guy's trying to be a little edgy or question the mainstream deal. But I feel like, do you see pictures of Jesus, I'm thinking about his emotions, right? Like how you frame what Jesus is. This one is trying to push the boundaries about his anger or whatever, but his emotional life as for example, I could see some of them that you've seen probably have this Jesus, this almost like he hovers above the ground kind of feel, his it's almost like ethereal feel, just kind of always calm.
Like the first one where he's glowing.
Huh?
Like the first one where he was glowing.
Yeah, always glowing. Doesn't really engage. Doesn't really react to anything. Just kind of nothing perturbs his peace. That kind of thing. But then you can also see. Yeah, I don't know. I'm curious because you've seen so many depictions of Jesus, right? If you see that attempts to sanitize the humanity of Jesus, or almost make him not human, almost sort of this idea that he's God, he's divine, so he's not really human. He's almost illusory human,
Yeah, it's I think it. I think there's a thing in the fact that in all of these films, and because it's in the text, what happens is that Jesus does a thing that Jesus steps into that risky situation, and I suppose it's brought upon him, but there's that kind of element which is almost only a certain proportion of humans would respond to that in that way anyway, rather than that would oppose that situation or would stand up for the victim rather than going along with the majority. I think, so as you say, some films tend to portray a more divine Jesus, some try and do a more human Jesus. The tendency has tended to be that people always think they're trying to portray a more human Jesus, but it's kind of interesting as time moves on, you see how that's understood changes. So that was one of the things that DeMille, the guy that directed the first film, he thought he was doing. He was producing this more kind of muscular, manly Jesus than some of the other films. And yet to us, he looks quite old. He's got this kind of glowing sense and he seems not very affected by stuff. But at the same time, I think the Jesus in the last one, the Scorsese one we just watched, doesn't feel very. He's almost quite hard to relate to as a human. He doesn't kind of feel like the kind of person that you would often relate to. It's different. We don't know a lot of those things, how Jesus was in terms of some of these things, and this is why we fill our own gaps in, and why I think this is an interesting exercise to just kind of draw attention to how we fill those gaps in, and to ask ourselves why we fill them in certain ways and where that's coming from. But I don't know if that answers your question. But
yeah, I think it gets there. Yeah.
Okay. Right. Shall we? Let's have a look at. Let's have a look at. I think we'll look at one more, and then we'll chat about that one, because this is a kind of modern. This next one is a kind of modernized take on things. It's completely out of context of the rest of the film, but hopefully you kind of get what's going on, and then we'll discuss this.
The way I remember it, He was on his way to the temple. He saw they were throwing stones at me. He asked them why they were doing this, and they told him what I was.
And what were you?
Adulteress, whore, prostitute.
Self-employed.
He kneeled and looked at the ground. He said, "Let anyone among you who has not sinned be the first to throw a stone."
Typical.
He was writing something in the dirt, and he would not look at me. The people began to leave, the old people first, then the young. We were there alone, and there was no one around. I was looking at him, but he would not look at me. He was looking at the ground. He said, "Where are they? Has no one condemned you?" And I told him, "No, they're gone." Then he said, "Neither do I condemn you."
Okay, sorry, the quality is a bit ropey.
Wait, so is that attached to any of the films that we just watched?
No, so that's another. This is a different film,
Okay.
which is a kind of, yeah, it's a kind of more
Like a modern version?
Modern, well, kind of, yeah. I mean, so to explain the overall context of the film, it's kind of a, it's set in the, well, it was set on the kind of Millennium Eve, and the kind of idea of the film was that Jesus was coming back. It's another New York film. Jesus coming back to New York on Millennium Eve as the kind of the end of the world kind of thing. And he comes with Mary Magdalene, who we just saw, which is PJ Harvey, for those of you that know her music. And there's just this kind of moment when they ask, where she's kind of interrogated like this by these two characters. So it's kind of, so she's kind of recounting what happened to her, basically. Do you just want to play that again, John? Because it's really short, but I think it's quite an interesting take.
Yeah, really interesting. Like, that one's going to take me a long time to process.
That guy is hilarious. I thought it was funny.
Yeah, I mean, it's a comic film, but this is
I
slightly
can
more
tell.
sensible. Sorry, not sensible. One of the more kind of serious moments in it. But Jeremy, do you just want to play it back?
Yeah, repeat it.
Yeah.
All right. Let me share my screen again.
He was on his way to the temple. He saw they were throwing stones at me. He asked them why they were doing this, and they told him what I was.
And what were you?
Adulteress, whore, prostitute.
Self-employed.
He kneeled and looked at the ground. He said, "Let anyone among you who has not sinned be the first to throw a stone."
Typical.
He was writing something in the dirt, and he would not look at me. The people began to leave, the old people first, then the young. We were there alone, and there was no one around. I was looking at him, but he would not look at me. He was looking at the ground. He said, "Where are they? Has no one condemned you?" And I told him, "No, they're gone." Then he said, "Neither do I condemn you."
Okay.
You said that's contemporary?
Yeah. I mean, it was 20 years ago, but so it's kind of it's late 90s. But
What is
I like how she told the story that Jesus didn't look at her, but he was focused on the ground. And I get this, I can picture Jesus just like Jesus just, I'm sorry about that. Jesus is just so powerful and his demeanor and his wisdom that like to me it's like a sense of power, like not necessarily like not power like makes
like
someone inferior, but like just knowing like he's pro. You don't even have to look up, at anything, But they did say that he walked over and was like, "What's going on here?" He started writing on the ground, But I picture the whole scene as Jesus just, sitting there chilling, and they bring the woman to her, and like he not even looking around. He started writing on the ground. He just saying, "Look, whoever cast the first stone, whoever didn't sin, cast the first stone." And he just like You know, so where's your people now? Who's the people who continue? Like nobody. Well, go and say no more. And he hasn't looked up not once. Like to me, it's just like that's just like authority, like power, and like just just authority. You know, and that's how I seen it. You know, that's powerful. That's a very powerful way of handling a situation where you don't even have to look at it. You just know how to handle it. You just know. You know, that's very powerful. You know.
What's interesting well, go ahead, Grace.
Yeah, to kind of jump off from what Marquise, what you shared, I guess I appreciate your perspective in that, because the first time I watched it and the second time I was kind of a little bothered and by how she kept saying that Jesus didn't look at her and was looking at the ground. And I guess my response to it was, I guess when I think about like eye contact, like that's one way like you can tell the person that like they're seen and that you see them. And I don't know, it was like, why can't Jesus look at her, you know? But I think in another perspective, I guess, like what you were sharing, Marquise, like it didn't take away his level of compassion, you know? I think it was just his I guess the way you were sharing, like just his genuine heart and authority that, yeah, like he's not looking at her, not to judge her, but also he doesn't have to look at her to, I don't know. I'm still processing it, but it kind of rubbed me the wrong way when she kept saying like, he wouldn't look at me. Maybe it's just like the kind of something in myself, like, oh, I want to be seen and heard, you know, like, why can't Jesus see me? Or, I don't know. But
that is
sorry.
interesting.
Sorry. I was like, y'all seen the Matrix, right? Remember the Matrix at the end when Neo was fighting? He looked away. He's like, I got this one hand. I already got to look at him. Like, I'm sorry. My mind is just. I'm sorry. That's how I see it. It was like power in it. He just knew what was coming. He didn't even have to look no more. He just knew. Like that's how.
So in case that helps to understand the background for this. No, I want to add. I mean, it's funny how even eye contact is a cultural thing, right? Because if you come for certain contexts, it's intense. You're always looking at eye contact. It's not, polite. But as you know from living in the hood, it's not always the best way to socially interact with everybody is looking eye contact, right? Right away.
Yeah, hard to look at somebody in the eyes when I'm talking to them.
Yeah, it's not necessarily. I mean, and then other people would feel it's disrespect, right? So I think that's something interesting. But then I also was thinking like this is a context of a shrink. I think I hear it as a therapist, right? And then so it's almost like she's processing what just happened. Like this is a moment that I'm really affected by. Like, and so the therapist, processing it in that way. I found it very fascinating to frame it as that. And then I was wondering, what is the guy walking around the woman supposed to be?
I think they're like detectives. I thought of them as like detectives, like they're trying to figure out what's going on or what.
Yeah, maybe it was
the witness, But I think it's real interesting what Marquise and Grace said, because when I was hearing her talk about it, like what was happening, I also saw this still, one spot elusive Jesus, right? And it's weird that all these movies that we just seen, and I don't think I've seen the Jesus that I've actually saw on a movie. These are a whole bunch of new Jesuses. Oh, but yeah, I don't know. I lost my original thought.
One of the things I like about this one, one of the reasons I included it, is of the ones we've seen, it's the it's the first one, probably the only one that actually tells a story from the woman's perspective. So all the others, the kind of Jesus really is the focus, or the kind of woman's in it, but they're kind of essentially reworking, as Gennady said, this kind of male narrative, whereas actually this one puts the woman right in the middle of it and brings her experience of it. And I mean, you know, we've talked a lot about that kind of line that she repeats, you know, I looked at him, but he didn't look at me. And it's kind of interesting, in all the previous clips we've looked at, we've not really thought about, you know, or certainly we've not talked about it. You know, did Jesus look at the woman? When did Jesus look at the woman? You know, that wasn't even one of the questions that occurred to us. But now, because the woman is kind of becomes the focus of the story, or how the story is told from, it's told from that female perspective, that then this is a question, and we kind of, you know, we sense the way that she feels slighted by that. Now, you know, that whole element is entirely a kind of, you know, fiction made by the filmmaker as part of what he's doing. But it's just, you know, it's just kind of interesting how when you start looking at the story through from the perspective of somebody else, from different perspective from how it was written from, you kind of see other things, and you think other questions, and it makes you feel, it gives you other information, makes you feel like some of the other people in the story and how they would have thought of it. It gives you a kind of a broader appreciation for some of the dynamics that are going on in these stories, and you know, rather than just being kind of flat stories on a page. And you kind of think, oh yeah, well, what would it been like to feel? You know, this is something that I've done with groups before, that away from film, rather than just kind of, you know, reading the text, but then adopting the position of one person in the scene, and how do they see the things? Sorry, excuse me.
Yeah,
how are they seeing what's unfolding? How does it feel to be that person? What are they noticing and feeling in the story?
Yeah, I want to say also that like you said, it's her storyline. She's now telling her story to someone else. And I think also, like, touching back on what Marquis said about how Jesus has that like authority, like she was telling the story, she's not crying, she's not trembling, she's not shaking, she's unbothered, like she's unwavering, just telling the complete story. And she's like, he didn't look at me, but I looked at him, and it was kind of just like, okay, like, we're doing this is just happening. And like the authority of like him knowing that like I'm going to take control of this situation and share some words, and like, you know, like, this is over, like shit, like just showing like the non-worrying, like, you know, like just how he's not worried. Like I feel like there's no sense of fear or anger or anything. There's just this, yeah, this is what happened, or kind of view, right?
Yeah. Great. Okay, well let's have a look at the last two clips, because I'm gonna have to go reasonably soon. Yeah, so we've got two clips here. One is the Passion of the Christ, which you've probably heard of even if you've not seen. And then the last one's a film that's shot a couple of years later, a South African film, which again is a kind of modernisation, but it's kind of set in an African township. So.
sisifebe uyaxexeza sasazi izifo nokuncola eluntwini oqinisekileyo kufana simohlwaye uyavumelana nathi ewe okanye hayi hey sidakalana apha hambani apho itsho kufanele linelo ahlwaywe
baphiye bamangeleli bakho
bamkile
hamba ke mna ndikubeka ityala
enkosi enkosi
hamba hamba
nabo ucocwe
That one was kind of lacking for me. Like it was different, and I was just like expecting more from that one.
Wow, that was it was definitely jarring because it was in the language and then it's the way they did it. But yeah, the gasoline and all that.
Super intense.
Yeah.
Super intense.
Yeah, I really don't have too much to say about that, except when the first part where she was really running for her life, you know, and then they stopped and was like, "Oh, what should we do?" You know, and yeah, that part was kind of like that was really intense. That was really intense. You know, I don't think it was a casual thing like, "Oh, before we even touch her, before we even, you know, pick on her, let's bring her to Jesus and see what he said before we actually started the thing." You know, I kind of believe they was probably picking at her, pushing her around, hitting her, or whatever, and then brought it to her, you know, and Jesus was like, you know, what should we do? Whatever, you know. So, like I said, people's minds are twisted, you know, it's perverted, and, you know, they do whatever, you know, they just do whatever, you know, and it's just like, that was a good way of showing how it possibly, I don't know, just a good way of showing, you know, how that happened to them, or their perspective of seeing it. You know, it's just pretty intense stuff.
Yeah, that's what I said, like I was expecting more from that one, because like it started off so good, like that was super realistic, you know, and intense, like it was scary. And you know, the soldier told him to disperse, and then he says, "See, no one's accusing you." Like that was weird. It just didn't make it sense even. So I was just expecting more from that one, but it was visually jarring.
Yeah, it takes away the power of the fact that they disperse the inner thing that we think that.
Yeah.
Whole,
the conscious.
Yeah, the whole first stone thing.
Deciding.
It doesn't have that moment. I mean, they could have modernized it, but they didn't do an equivalent with the who did not sin, cast the first, you know.
Yeah.
Can I? Who hasn't sinned? Can we borrow a lighter from you or something like that? They could have done that.
Throw the first match and run fast.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
I guess one of the things I like about that, just thinking about it now, is that in the Bible and in the other ones we've seen, it kind of, Jesus diffusing that situation relies on him having the good line, right? He has to kind of, he's able to diffuse it because he thinks, "Oh, I'll ask them, you know, who of them's not sinned," and he kind of, and then they all go, "Yeah." Whereas without having that in the second one, I think it almost kind of does this. It almost kind of does this thing of, well, you know, actually Jesus in that situation, he was just prepared to stand up and stop the mob, and to kind of put himself in the gap there. And actually, he never gets the word, and he's kind of he gets a break because the soldier comes along. But I guess, you know, for us, it's this kind of thing. Well, you know, we might find ourselves in situations where we don't have this, you know, brilliant idea about saying, you know, whoever throws the first stone, you know, whoever's without sin, they can throw the first stone. You know, those words might not come to us, but we still might be able to kind of stand in there and take that step and make a difference, even just by, you know, putting yourselves forward.
Divine intervention.
Yeah.
The soldier.
Yeah, but you know, if Jesus had kind of, you know, had just stood back because he hadn't had the word, you know, then yeah, that still probably would have gone on, or it would have been too late by the time the soldier got there, or, you know, I guess it's that thing of
It would have been. Oh, never mind.
Yeah, the Bible talks about Jesus being an example for us, doesn't it? And it's kind of, and sometimes when Jesus gets these kind of, you know, brilliant words, it's okay to go, well, you know, okay, that was fine for you because you got the great word, but what does this mean for me? Because, you know, I'm not that smart. And you know, but actually, whereas with that last one, we can all do that. We can all stand in that position and stand.
Be like,
Yeah,
see, that's what you get.
Yeah, I want to say if I wanted to like do a adaptation of, you know, that scene, I want to, like, you know how the samurais, when they lose a battle, they gotta like stab themselves in like the heart or the stomach, something like that. I feel like whoever have a sin gotta do that.
Oh my God, that's so funny. You know what I was thinking? I was like, what if the guy set himself on fire by accident and the guy was just like, see, that's what you get. Now leave. No one accuses you. Like, that would have been funny too. Marquise, we should totally make a remake of this scene. We should totally do it. You could be Jesus.
Can I? Hey, Matt. I know you got to get running, but can I ask you one last question?
Yeah, please do.
Overall,
we should make this scene where everybody's a different race that in the film, and it's just all cohesive. All right, never mind. Sorry.
We can keep chatting about this, but because by the way, Matt's joining us from the UK, so Amy just looked it up. Is it like 3 a.m. over there right now?
No, it's 1:30, but
past 1. So it's actually 1 a.m. So we gotta let him go. But I want to say, well, last question, and then if you're okay with, just pray and bless you as you go. Thank you. But Matt, of all the you've watched so many of these, is there something that you would say, I mean, besides what you've been sharing and just kind of like the whole like recognizing, it's almost like you're doing text comparison, like the way critical analysis of you know, when you compare the Gospels, it's very similar to when people are comparing the Gospels and try to say what was Matthew trying to do, what was Mark trying to do, what was John trying to do, what was Luke, because they do have different agendas of what they're trying to show about Jesus, and you're trying to help us be critical and or discern and understand and like just observe, you know, which I find it really helpful. But is there something just overall in your process? I mean, you've been doing this for 15 years, you know, of, I don't know, like if there is a thing that's come of that, as you think about Jesus, or as you think about, yeah, I mean, different adaptations or attempts to depict Jesus that you would make as a conclusion, what would you say?
Sorry, I'm not quite sure I've got the question.
I don't know how to word this.
Any kind of, yeah.
You're better.
I guess if you were to sum up your journey of 15 years of like, you know, looking into films about Jesus, how would you sum it up in a nutshell? Or
yeah, okay. I mean, I think I started off trying to find a representation that I thought was a good alternative way of getting people to look at the Bible, and, you know, that was kind of that people might find easier to go with than reading the text, or it might at least kind of liven up a bit. And I think that was my original agenda when I started off. But I think as I went along, I started to realise that there were actually more interesting things to come out from watching the different films than that. And so one of them is around the whole thing of seeing things, you know, getting a bit more of a feel for the context. Again, that's a fairly basic one. but then also the thing of spotting the things you hadn't noticed, and the things that you kind of never thought of. So like a couple of examples of times you've kind of read the story a bunch of times, you never actually noticed that it says this or how it puts this particular angle. And even like going through some of these tonight, I've kind of thought extra things, I've thought about the text in a new way. And then I think probably where it's kind of ended up for me, or is that thing of kind of challenging my own thought processes and why. And so kind of going back to that first exercise, when you look at the two things, why do I think it's this way and not that way? And what is the kind of baggage that I'm bringing with me? What are my kind of preconceptions that I'm bringing with me that aren't anything to do with what the Bible says? It's just about my stuff, my tendency to make Jesus in my own image, or those things. And actually, so almost in those cases, actually the ones that provoke us the most are almost the most helpful in a way, because they make us think. They kind of challenge something. Oh, I don't like that, but do I not like that because that's blatantly not what happened, or do I just not like that because it's going against my baggage, which is no more justified than their take on it? And so it kind of, I guess, it's that thing that can shine the light on our blind spots and show us where we're kind of assuming stuff that we shouldn't necessarily be doing. So I don't know if that's
really helpful.
Yeah.
Well, Matt, I mean, actually, the whole goal of the whole series, I think, of these conversations about Jesus, we're gonna have. By the way, next week, I think, is we're gonna have this guy, Dennis Edwards. Hey, Damien. He's gonna come share about Jesus from his perspective. He's a Mennonite scholar and a Baptist. And he's gonna share about Jesus.
It's beautiful.
And he's going to share about Jesus, kind of his relationship to the people in the margins, and more specifically from a text angle from the scriptures, as a Bible scholar. But it's coming up on Easter, so it's a significant time to be thinking about these things. But yeah, I appreciate this. I appreciate your angle, Matt, and just helping us sort of kind of keep a good head on our shoulders. I think a dichotomy I see oftentimes is those who want to be critical, not critical in a negative sense, but critical as in like ask questions and like have a more sort of question our assumption. Oftentimes are like people who would be like, there's the Jesus of faith and the Jesus of history, and they're completely incompatible. Done, and for me, at least, as a follower of Jesus, I would not want people who, I think that we've seen too often, the church that makes Jesus in their image and then hurt people within, like, you mentioned women lots of times, then go and kind of suppress people, whatever, right? Because then you've got God, I've got Jesus, and I can use this to do whatever my agenda is. So I feel like it's always a good exercise for us to always allow ourselves to be critical and thinking about the scriptures, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John comparatively, but also not turn off our brains as we watch films of Jesus and recognize what's going on. So anyways, all that to say, really appreciate you. I want to let you go because it's kind of late, but can we say a quick prayer for you? Bless you. Thank you. And send you on your way as you continue. I know that you also are writing, right? You're writing a piece for a book on Jesus in film, right?
Well, I've got a book coming out next year, yeah. 100 book films, so with the British Film Institute. So yeah.
So maybe some of us, when it comes out, message us, and we can maybe buy one copy and circulate it around. I don't know, or we can all buy copies if you guys have the money for that. But yeah, I want to let you go, and then the rest of us, if you want to chat, continue, we'll hang around. But Amy, when you want to pray real quick for Matt and just bless him.
Dear God, thank you for this time where we can gather virtually, and thank you for Matt and just him being generous with his time with us. motley crew here in North Philadelphia. Just we can have this really interesting discussion to think about who you are and what you mean to us. And thank you for these stories that are so compelling, that have been in so many different films all around the world. And yeah, I just pray that you would bless Matt with his writing and catching up on sleep, and yeah, thank you so much for your good gifts in our lives, and pray that we can continue to grow in our community and to be able to share ideas and just reflect different facets of how we were made in your image. And we pray this in Jesus' name, amen.
Amen.